Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Young here and welcome to a Metal Gear Solid 5 gameplay analysis. In my previous video I analyzed the intro cutscene of the 30 minutes gameplay presentation. Today I would like to analyze the rest of the footage, which consists of pure unadulterated gameplay. I'll be skipping around to refrain from pointing out anything that's already discussed by the developer commentary, or anything that's clearly visible or obvious in the footage, so I recommend you watch the entirety of the 30 minutes gameplay presentation if you haven't done so yet. Anyways, without further ado, let's dive right into it.
Now go! Let the legend come back to life.
I would like to begin by talking about the new and improved iDroid. If you compare Ground Zeroes' iDroid version 1.02 to Phantom Pain's iDroid version 3.02, you will notice the new iDroid looks more advanced aesthetically. Replacing the black and white holographic display from the old version is a blue holographic display, with a hue that's pretty similar to the iDroid from old Ground Zeroes footage, giving the new iDroid a more futuristic look. Furthermore, version 3.02 gets rid of the noise found on the holographic display of version 1.02 and adds a dotted texture to the background that reminds me a lot of the texture on the DualShock 4's touchpad. Revisions and modifications have also been made to the user interface. While the new iDroid retains the overall layout of the old one, featuring the same menu, map, and navigation tabs at the top, there are significant additions that set it apart. On the bottom right corner, you will find the in-game clock in military time, showing that the mission begins at 2:58 PM in the demo. Below the time, you will find the total amount of GMP, which is Phantom Pain's currency. GMP stands for Gross Military Product, and this is the same currency used in Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. With GMP, players can upgrade their base, research and develop new items, weapons, and equipment, and new to this game is the ability to use GMP in the field for support, which we'll see more of later on in the presentation. Moving along, the bottom left corner displays a number of button prompts for the map. Some of the ones found in the old iDroid are no longer present, such as the left and right stick prompts to scroll and rotate the map respectively, and the square button prompt to toggle satellite view. Returning are the X button prompt to place a map marker, the R3 prompt to zoom the map in and out, and the triangle prompt to toggle the map's orientation between Snake's perspective and the compass's perspective. New to the latest iDroid is the L3 prompt, which allows players to reset coordinates to Snake's position. Such a feature wasn't really necessary in Ground Zero since Camp Omega's map was relatively small, but in Phantom Pain, locations are expected to be many times larger, so such a feature will ensure that players don't get lost when navigating the map. The larger map size also allows for sections of the map to be labeled. In this particular shot, we can see that the mission begins in an area called Spugme Ruins and leads to another area called Da Wialo Kalai, excuse the pronunciation. Now, for those worried that satellite view won't make a return, don't worry, it just works differently now. Instead of having players toggle satellite map, the iDroid will automatically switch to satellite view when the map is zoomed in, and it will switch back to classic view when zoomed out. Finally, for the map tab, I would like to examine the top right corner of the interface, which displays the player's current mission. Now, what's interesting is that this little window isn't just labeled Mission, but rather Selected Mission, almost as if suggesting that in the field, players can designate one of various incomplete missions scattered throughout the map as an active mission through some kind of quests menu in the iDroid. Similar to how in Skyrim, players can designate one of many incomplete quests scattered throughout the game world as active through a quests menu. In Skyrim, an active quest would tag the map with an arrow to indicate the general location of the current objective. So perhaps this yellow marker serves a similar function in Phantom Pain. Such a system would mean that players would no longer have to choose missions through a selection menu like in Peace Walker or Ground Zeroes. They would only have to choose the location they want to go to, and all the missions would be there, available for players to tackle however or whenever they wish. Such a system would allow players to tackle and complete multiple missions before extraction. And I don't know about you, but such a system would truly make Phantom Pain feel like the open-world stealth simulation that it's striving to be. Alright, so that about sums up the map tab of the new iDroid. I'll talk about the menu tab in a later portion of the demo. For now, let's continue. Something that's very unfortunate about this demo is the amount of pop-in that is clearly visible throughout the landscape, but it's important to keep in mind that this is an early build of the PlayStation 4 version of the game, with many months of refining and optimization ahead. Next, I would like to freeze the footage right here and talk about these light blue veins that envelop the exterior of this rock. I thought at first that perhaps these are mineral veins that can be mined for GMP, but then I realized that similar blue markings can also be found on some of the buildings later on in the gameplay, so I think the safest assumption to make is that the blue markings are actually Arabic words painted on the rock. Now I can't read Arabic, so I can't confirm 100%. If there is anyone out there who can read Arabic and perhaps provide clarification for what these blue markings are, please let us know in the comments below. Later in the footage, we get to see Snake use his binoculars for the first time in this demo, and for the most part, they seem to look and work very similarly to the ones found in Ground Zeroes, but one significant difference is that players can now place map markers through the binoculars by pushing the L2 button. Also new to Phantom Pain is that when enemies are knocked unconscious, their markers will now change from orange to blue. Holding up makes a return, but some modifications have been made. Players are no longer required to hold a button to bring up the dialogue menu like in Ground Zeroes. It's now toggled, as can be deduced from the addition of the R3 button prompt that says cancel. Now the dialogue menu no longer contains just dialogue, but also functions like knock and call horse. Since those take up the up and right input on the right stick respectively, all the dialogue was moved to the left. Returning options are spit it out and get down, and one new addition is where are the rest. My assumption is that the new option specifically asks the guard to tell Snake the location of other guards who become tagged automatically. In Ground Zeroes, only certain guards would tell Snake the location of others through the spit it out dialogue. Giving this function its own dialogue option makes sense for Phantom Pain, since maps are much larger and more heavily populated than Ground Zeroes, which means players will need more ways to tag targets than just the binoculars. Now, one dialogue option that didn't make the cut is column, likely because it's no longer needed thanks to the new knock function, which we'll see in action later. The player goes with the spit it out option, yielding information in regards to a container somewhere nearby containing raw materials. A returning feature of Ground Zeroes is that extracted information in regards to resources and points of interest will be marked on the map accordingly. Snake proceeds by using the Fulton recovery system on both guards. In Phantom Pain, players can carry an unlimited amount of Fultons into the field, but they will be limited by GMP, as every use of Fulton costs 300 GMP. Furthermore, in Phantom Pain, Fultons have a success rate, which will vary depending on the load and environmental conditions like weather, so there's always the risk of wasting 300 GMP. Interesting to note is that as one of the guards gets Fultoned, he actually speaks Russian.
Check that out in a bit. But first, let's go ahead and get rid of these guys. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is the Fulton recovery system.
In past games, Snake's multilingual abilities would be represented by having everyone speak English.
By the way, your Russian is superb. Where did you learn to speak it?
From my mentor.
But in this game, it looks like NPCs, or at least guards, will speak their native tongue, which is pretty cool.
Those guys are gonna hit.
After Fultoning the sheep, the player brings up the iDroid for the second time. And on the bottom right corner, there's a yellow indicator that says Recovery in Progress, which likely appears whenever something is in the process of being Fultoned or being sent back to base. Now, something you may notice here as Snake is running around is this strap from one of his bags or pouches dangling around. Kojima did this on purpose so that it would look like a tail to match Snake's horn to complete his demon look. Moving on, let's fast forward to this point in the footage in which we get to witness Big Boss performing his new knock move, although you can hardly call it a knock. If you look closely, you will notice that Big Boss's hand will turn at the wrist, creating sparks and noise to lure guards. It's a far more versatile ability than the wall knocking from past games. Now, this is clearly the same dialogue menu from before, except the dialogue options are gone since Snake isn't nearby a coerced guard. In Ground Zeroes, the only way to bring up the menu was to get close to a coerced guard and hold down the L1 button, but now that the menu serves other functions, it can be toggled at any time, although what options appear will depend on current conditions and circumstances. Snake proceeds by performing CQC on the Lord Guard. Notice the blood splatter at the point of impact. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever seen CQC shed blood in Ground Zeroes. This is indication that the blood and gore levels in Phantom Pain have been elevated to match the game's darker tone, and we'll actually get another look at this later in the demo. After using Fulton on the container, the iDroid warns Snake about an incoming sandstorm. The iDroid will not only do so through audio, but also visually through the notifications area on the left. Now, I'm going to skip the majority of the sandstorm portion since it's explained by the commentary. As the sandstorm clears, you will notice a number of new notifications on the left. The first one is delivered by the Intel unit, informing players that once the sandstorm passes, the weather will be cloudy. The gameplay demo really shows off the fact that the units in Mother Base will not just be background participants, they will have a direct impact in the field, and we will see more of this later on. Also, as a side note, somebody needs to learn how to spell vicinity. Now, what's interesting is that in Phantom Pain, things extracted via Fulton are recovered in bulks instead of one at a time. Perhaps Diamond Dogs makes passes every few in-game hours to recover everything up to that point. Amongst the extracted things are 10 common metals, which are the raw materials inside the container. Before I talk about their significance, take a listen to the developer commentary here.
Okay, so raw diamonds. These raw diamonds are an example of raw materials that you can gather around the map. These are scattered throughout the landscape, and when you pick them up, they get sent back to Mother Base and add to your GMP. GMP being the currency in Phantom Pain, which you can use to upgrade your base, and also develop new items and equipment.
As you heard, once raw materials get sent back to Mother Base, they do nothing more than add to GMP. So if I were you, I wouldn't expect some kind of intricate crafting system in which players are forced to recover specific materials to develop specific things. One more thing I would like to point out about raw materials is that some of them will come in different sizes. In this gameplay demo, we are shown that raw diamonds can come in small or large, and I think it's safe to expect a medium size as well. Obviously, the larger the size, the larger the GMP gain. After tagging all the targets, the player brings up the iDroid once again, during which we get our first look at the menu tab. On the bottom right corner, we can see that time and GMP are still displayed, indicating that the small window is universal across all three tabs. Now, what's interesting is that time is passing a lot faster here than earlier in the demo. Previously, even after 10 seconds, the time remained 2:58 PM. But here, a minute in-game goes by pretty much every second. I'm not sure if this was done for demonstration purposes in the interest of time, or if certain conditions make in-game time go faster. To the left, we can see yet another notification from the iDroid, this time warning players that the sun will set shortly. Looks like the iDroid won't just warn players of weather conditions, but also about the day and night cycle, which could come in handy if the game features a day and night cycle system in which there are different sunrise and sunset times depending on the season or the part of Earth that Snake is in. Moving on, let's talk about the Mother Base menu, which extends to 4 submenus. The 2 that are shown, Staff Management and Research and Development, were both in Peace Walker's Mother Base menu. So if we follow this pattern, I think it's a pretty safe assumption to make that one of the unknown options will be dedicated to the metal gear that players will be customizing in Phantom Pain, which many, including myself, are assuming to be an enhanced Zeke. As for the other unknown menu, I think we can rule out Peace Walker's online options like Delivery, Recruit, Versus Ops, and Trade, since the online stuff will likely be handled either on a separate menu or outside the single-player mode, perhaps in the form of Metal Gear Online. That leaves us with 2 possible options from Peace Walker, Database or Outer Ops. The former would allow players to see Mother Base and player data and statistics, while the latter would allow players to assign recruits to perform a variety of missions in the background to raise their levels and to bring back more GMP. One final possibility is that one of the unknown options has to do with the base customization, allowing players to build Mother Base and customize its aesthetics. Developers have stated many times that Phantom Pain's base management will be extensive enough to allow players to make Mother Base their own, so I'm sure there is some kind of Mother Base builder menu in which players can choose the placement of platforms, objects, and personnel, and maybe even choose color scheme. We are then taken into the Staff Management submenu, which contains 3 options, one of them being Staff List. It's hard to deduce what the other 2 could be, since in Peace Walker, selecting the Staff menu takes players directly to the Staff List instead of showing more options. So let's talk about the Staff List, which is structured very similarly to Peace Walker. At the top, we have the various tabs, starting with the Waiting Room, from which new recruits can be assigned to the various units. Peace Walker veterans will notice that the coffee cup symbol has been replaced with this hexagon. The next tab is the Combat Unit, which according to the description, serves a very similar purpose to Peace Walker's Combat Unit. Now, something that caught my attention was the last sentence of the description, which reads, "Contracting multiple missions yields even more GMP." Perhaps this is hinting at a new and enhanced outer ops system in which players can contract multiple missions at a time and assign combat unit teams to them, raising their levels and gaining GMP in the process. What do you think? Next up is R&D, or Research and Development. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The higher the unit's level, the more types of items can be unlocked for development. It's pretty similar to Peace Walker's R&D unit, although as we will see later on, the unit now has more influence in the field. Next up is a new unit that developers decided not to unveil yet, which is symbolized by 2 hexagons on top of each other. A possibility that I can think of is that this is the Construction Unit, with higher levels allowing players to construct more platforms and also unlock parts and edifices to add on top of them. Further corroborating the possibility is the fact that the Mother Base symbol in the menu tab also consists of hexagons. Moving on, we have yet another new tab, the Support Unit. According to the description, the unit provides support during battle in form of weapon or ammo supply drops and airstrikes. As the unit's level increases, more types of attacks become available, and response times for support become shorter. Furthermore, Fulton success rate during bad weather also improves. In Peace Walker, Mother Base always felt like a backdrop to me, but that all seems to change with additions like a Support Unit, which essentially bridges the gap between Mother Base and the field. For the first time, it actually feels as though Snake has an entire base and army watching his back. The next tab is the Intel Unit, which Peace Walker veterans should be familiar with, but in Phantom Pain, the unit will have additional functions that will allow it to have a much more significant impact in the field. According to the description, the Intel Unit investigates and provides intel on mission areas. As the unit's level increases, intel becomes more detailed and arrives more frequently. We have already been shown glimpses of the unit's participation in the field through the notifications that it provides, and we'll see even more later in the footage. Next up is the Medical Unit. Unfortunately, the highlighter never reaches the Medical Unit, so we never get to see a description of it. Suffice to say that like other units, it will expand upon the function it served in Peace Walker. Finally, the last 2 tabs are the Sickbay and the Brig. In Peace Walker, the former is where recruits are sent to recover when they are sick or injured, and the latter is where hostile and unyielding new recruits are sent to be reasoned with into joining Big Boss. I don't foresee any of that changing in Phantom Pain, but I do foresee the addition of a function for the Brig: torture and interrogation. We have seen a lot of it throughout the various Phantom Pain trailers, and with Ocelot now on board, such a function for the Brig is well within the realm of possibility. Through torture and interrogation, players could perhaps extract additional intel that will aid them in accomplishing mission objectives or finding resources for Mother Base. Next to the tabs, we can see the number of personnel on the current tab, in this case 9 in the waiting room, and the total number of personnel in the entirety of Mother Base, in this case 35 out of 350. Looks like personnel capacity will work similarly to Peace Walker, meaning that 350 people is Mother Base's maximum capacity. 300 of them can be assigned to units, and the remaining capacity of 50 is shared by the waiting room, the sickbay, and the brig. In the middle of it all is a list of staff members structured similarly to Peace Walker. The square button can be used to select or deselect staff members players would like to reassign, and then the X button can be used to change assignment. One minor difference is the triangle button, which is labeled as Switch Display instead of Details. In Peace Walker, the button would provide a full profile of a selected staff member. I can't say for sure if that function will remain in Phantom Pain or if the triangle button's function has been changed to something different. A more significant difference is the way rankings work in Phantom Pain. Instead of just having ranks E through A, each letter now has 9 subdivisions labeled by numbers from 1 to 9. My belief is that higher numbers represent a lower rank, similar to how letters further in the alphabet signify a lower rank, which would mean that rankings now go from E9 all the way to A1. Without counting S rank, Peace Walker only has 5 different ranks, while Phantom Pain has 45. Counting the S rank, Peace Walker has 6 ranks, while Phantom Pain has 46 or 54 ranks, depending on whether or not the S rank is also subdivided by numbers. That about sums up Phantom Pain's staff list. One more thing I would like to point out is the three-dimensional aesthetics of the interface. Currently, we are looking at the interface from a top-down view. These squares up here, hovering above the tabs, are actually 3D graph bars seen from above. Once the player decides to assign staff members, the top-down view will shift to a bird's-eye front view, from which you can get a better idea for the length of these bars, especially after they shift inwards. Anyways, after the player boosts the intel unit to level 9 by assigning staff members, a new function is added to Snake's repertoire, Scouting, which allows the intel unit to provide relative areas of enemy locations. These functions become more powerful as units' levels increase, so it's likely that with a high enough level, the intel unit will eventually be able to scout out and tag guards instead of just providing a general area. Using a combination of the new intel and the ability to place multiple markers on the map, the player proceeds by tagging as many guards as possible. Notice how after more than 3 markers are placed, the earliest placed markers begin disappearing. In other words, players can only place a maximum of 3 markers at a time, at least for now. Moving on, we are shown one of Phantom Pain's new items, the Phantom Cigar. The item's description states that it's a cigar blended with a medicinal herb that speeds up the user's perception of time. So basically, custom-made weed. Now, this part is important. Loses efficacy if the user is under stress, for instance, if spotted by an enemy. In other words, players will want to use this somewhere safe, since Snake is not immune to being detected while using the cigar, and once detected, time will stop fast-forwarding, and players will have to deal with the consequences. As the developer states, the e-cigar produces no smoke or ash, which is ideal for a stealth mission. Once the cigar is in use, it produces an impressive time-lapse effect, simulating the medicinal herb's effect of speeding up the user's perception of time. Once time is resumed, the player proceeds by drawing an infiltration path using the map markers, and once again, markers lowest in the alphabet disappear to maintain the 3 markers capacity. Moving on, we are given a look at the iDroid's Research and Development submenu, which shows the following options: primary weapons, secondary weapons, support weapons, items, and tools. This seems to be a modified version of Peace Walker's R&D menu. The mechs option is no longer necessary, since vehicles can now be Fultoned in Phantom Pain, and the other option was likely excluded since it was more of an archive, letting players know what documents and design specs have been collected, how much ammunition there is, and what uniforms are available, all likely presented elsewhere in Phantom Pain. We are then taken into the items option, which is also structurally similar to Peace Walker. Like in Peace Walker, each item can be upgraded up to 5 levels, and the same likely applies to weapons. Speaking of items, 3 of them are clearly visible: the cardboard box, night vision goggles, and the Phantom Cigar. Items for which the R&D unit level requirement is met are marked with a blue bar labeled Unlock, indicating that said items are ready for development by paying their GMP cost. Notice that unlike in Peace Walker, development occurs immediately. Once developed, certain items like the cardboard box may branch out into multiple paths. Now, items for which the R&D unit level requirement isn't met will be marked with a red bar labeled Lock. This player may have enough GMP to buy the upgrade, but the R&D unit's level is still too low. Moving on, I would like to direct your attention to the 2 tabs at the top of the interface. The first tab is clearly labeled Items, but the second one is a little less clear. But if you look closely, you may notice that the icon shape resembles the iDroid, leading me to believe that this tab will be dedicated to upgrading and enhancing the device. New to the R&D unit is its ability to take a more active role in the field, by allowing players to develop items and weapons on the fly and have them sent directly to Snake. Players will have to be careful with this feature though, since each supply request will cost them a significant amount of GMP. Alright, so let's fast forward a bit through this self-explanatory portion and stop right here, where the player brings up the iDroid once again, this time showing off the support menu. But before I move on, I would like to talk about the remaining two menu options. Might as well talk about them now since they never get shown in this demo. The second to last menu option has the same icon as the log option in Ground Zeroes, so maybe that's exactly what it is. In Ground Zeroes, the log menu would record things like radio calls, conversations, notifications, trials, and cutscenes, but there is always the chance that the log menu has been repurposed a bit for Phantom Pain. The last menu option is a little more difficult to deduce, since the icon is new as far as I can tell, but if I had to guess, I would say that it's perhaps the menu I was talking about before that lists incomplete missions, one of which can be set as active in a similar fashion to Skyrim's quest menu. What are your thoughts? Once support is selected, three submenus present themselves: supply drop, air support, and helicopter. The latter two menus will be shown later, so for now let's focus on supply drop. Save for the addition of the bullets/suppressors option, it's pretty much identical to the R&D menu. Once players choose what they would like to have supplied, they can proceed by tagging an exact location for the drop. Now, I wonder if there will be consequences for excessive use of supply drops and airstrikes. In Peace Walker, going overboard with supply or strike markers would have a negative impact on the player's heroism points, so maybe a similar system will be implemented. Let's fast forward through the presentation once again and stop right here. On the wall, you'll find these little pictures of various vehicles, including jeeps, LAVs, BTRs, and tanks, perhaps hinting at some of the vehicles that players will encounter in Phantom Pain. And all of these vehicles can likely be Fultoned back to base. Next, I would like to direct your attention to this portion of the presentation. The ability to hide inside large containers was oddly missing in Ground Zeroes, and it was one of the most common criticisms of the game. Fortunately, the developers listened to feedback and have implemented the feature in Phantom Pain. Props to Kojima Productions for being humble and so open to suggestions. Let's fast forward once again, and this time I would like to talk about this moment in the demo when Snake dives into this small stream to avoid being detected. I was pleased to see that Snake's clothes actually get wet when they make contact with the water. Noticeable effects include the way Snake's clothes glisten to the sunlight, and the way water drizzles out of Snake's clothes as he stands up. Unfortunately, Snake's skin and hair don't seem to get wet, at least as far as I can see, which breaks the illusion a bit. The game still has months of development ahead, so I'm sure they'll play around with the effects for optimal results. Moving on, here is a clear view of the Soviet Union flag, further corroborating Ocelot's intel that this entire area is under Soviet control. The player eventually makes it into the target building, finding a POW along the way. Like in Peace Walker, POWs likely have better stats than regular enemy soldiers, so it's to the player's advantage to rescue as many POWs as possible. This particular POW has been given the face of a Kojima Productions staff member through the Fox Engine's facial capture technology. Now, I have seen some impressive results with the Fox Engine's facial capture, but this right here is a bit of a poor example. While the resemblance is definitely there, his blank stare makes him look soulless and doesn't really match the circumstances he is under. I hope Kojima Productions doesn't get lazy with the faces of non-essential NPCs. Before rescuing the POW, the player proceeds by retrieving the files with intel on Kaz's location. Notice how the icon for retrieving the intel is the same as the icon for Ground Zeroes' log menu option, also used for one of Phantom Pain's unknown menu options. Perhaps this is indication that the log option has been repurposed in Phantom Pain to provide mission information on the currently active mission. If you haven't noticed, the mission info menu option from Ground Zeroes is gone in Phantom Pain, so it's possible that its function has been integrated into the log menu. As Snake collects the intel, visible on the table is what is likely a topographic map of Phantom Pain's Afghanistan location. What I don't quite get is what the dark, bolded lines represent. If you have any ideas, be sure to let us know in the comments below. After collecting the intel, Snake proceeds by attempting to rescue the POW, but unlike in Peace Walker, Fultons can no longer be used indoors. Notice that GMP will not be refunded if a Fulton attempt is unsuccessful. After the POW is successfully rescued, Snake is detected thereafter, forcing the player to once again rely on the support unit. but this time we are shown inside the Air Support submenu, which branches out into 4 more options, one of them being Artillery. The other 3 options can likely be unlocked by increasing the support unit's level. I'd imagine that these get more powerful as they go down the list, so perhaps eventually players will get to call in bomb or missile strikes. I would also expect for the more powerful options to be significantly more expensive. After marking the airstrike's location, the player proceeds by using the support menu's 3rd option, Helicopter, to call an extraction chopper. The helicopter submenu seems to work and function pretty identically to Ground Zero's, so I don't think I need to go into much more detail. The one significant difference is that this time, calling in a chopper will cost players GMP. As Snake makes his escape, we are shown more signs that the level of blood and gore in Phantom Pain will be elevated. I already highlighted the added level of violence in hand-to-hand CQC, but it also applies to guns. If we compare headshots in this Phantom Pain demo to ones from Ground Zero's, there is clearly more blood splatter in Phantom Pain. The trailer proceeds with a wonderful display of fireworks, courtesy of the support unit's artillery strike. We are only looking at 1 of 4 airstrike options, so I can only imagine how destructive the others will be. The demo finally ends with Snake's extraction. Now, what is striking to me is how similar this Diamond Dog's chopper looks to the XOF choppers from Ground Zero's. It's hard to say whether the 2 groups are coincidentally using similar chopper models, or if the similarities hint at an early partnership between Skullface and Big Boss, in which Skullface provides Diamond Dogs with resources like choppers. What do you think? Coincidence, partnership, or something else? To end this trailer analysis, I would like to take a look at the mission rank menu. It's pretty much identical to the one found in Ground Zero's, except that retries has been relabeled to Game Over. Now, what I find interesting is that even with 13 kills, the player managed to get an S rank, which has me thinking that Phantom Pain will be more forgiving with players killing people. After all, Snake is not the same man from Ground Zero's. In Phantom Pain, Snake is out for blood, so it only seems natural that killing enemy guards won't be punished as severely. And with that, I would like to conclude this trailer analysis, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. In my next video, I'll be analyzing the Mother Base portion of the gameplay presentation, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't done so yet, to be further updated on Metal Gear Solid 5, be sure to join the NASIAN and subscribe to Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much, and Young out.